The sun hung low like a worn coin over the vast high plains, beaten down on the cracked earth with a heat that felt more like judgment than warmth. The wind whispered through the scrub like it knew secrets about the man on horseback moving slow across the ridge line. Boone Crowder hadn't spoken in 3 days. Not that he needed to. His horse, Dusty, didn't care for small talk, and the land didn't answer questions anyway. It just watched, silent and wide, and it remembered everything. The dust doesn't forget. He wore a battered hat pulled low over eyes the color of gunmetal, and a long coat that carried the weight of too many miles and too many winters. He was the kind of man towns whispered about, loners with a grave behind every mile. Once, a long time ago, there was laughter in him, a home, a family. But a fever had taken his wife and baby girl in a winter so cold even the whiskey froze in the bottle. Since then, he'd ridden west, farther and farther, not looking for anything in particular, just trying to stay ahead of ghosts that rode harder than any posse. Boone wasn't much for towns anymore. They were loud, messy, full of other people's problems. He preferred cattle and stars, but supplies didn't carry themselves, and a busted stirrup strap wouldn't fix itself. So he rode on, unaware that the town below was waiting to test the last good piece of him he still had left. The smell hit Boone first: sweat, whiskey, and desperation. The kind that clung to people and towns that long since stopped pretending they were better than they were. He tied Dusty outside the livery and made for the general store, hoping to be gone before the sun got too mean. But just as he passed the saloon, a voice cut through the heat. "Ladies and gents, feast your eyes! Next lot's a real prize!" Boone stopped. He knew that tone, greased with charm and greed in equal measure. Auctioneer. He turned, curious despite himself. A small crowd had gathered in front of a rickety platform made of warped planks. Boone figured it was some poor sod's estate being sold off. Tools, livestock, maybe a wagon wheel or two. Until the inventory changed. "Next up, we got a fine young woman, healthy, strong back, knows her way around a kitchen and a broom. Don't talk back, don't cry, and, gentlemen, she's got spirit. The kind that breaks real nice." Boone felt a cold knot form in his gut. He'd seen this before, out near the borderlands, when law turned its back and men turned feral. The girl stood barefoot on the platform, maybe 17, wearing a tattered dress that looked like it used to be blue. Her arms were roped at the wrists, her face smudged with dirt and dried blood at the corner of her mouth. But her chin was lifted, stubborn, her jaw set like stone. And then Boone saw it. Left shoulder, inked clean and black beneath the dust, a tattoo of a soaring eagle. It hit him like a bullet to the chest. He had seen that same eagle 5 years ago, when death circled him in the salt flats. A man had walked out of that firestorm of heat, carrying water and calm. Apache, silent, kind. He bore that eagle like a promise. This girl, she had to be his. "5 to start," the auctioneer crowed. "Who'll take this pretty little firebrand off our hands?" Boone didn't move, but something inside him did, something he thought was long dead. A trapper spat and shouted, "6!" Boone's hand twitched toward his belt where a pouch of coins rested. His jaw clenched. He should have walked away. But the eagle was watching. Boone stood still, one boot in the dust, the other on the edge of a choice that could gut what was left of his peace. He stared at the girl. She didn't cry, didn't beg, just stood there, bruised and bound, with fire in her eyes and a tattoo screaming across time. She wasn't a stranger, not completely. She was the echo of a man who'd once saved Boone's life and vanished before Boone could say thank you. And now she stood on a block like livestock, like a thing. "7!" came another shout. A man with bad teeth and mean eyes stepped forward, leering. Boone's fingers curled around the edge of his belt. "Walk away," the voice inside warned. "This ain't your fight. You don't owe the dead. You don't owe anybody." But that voice had grown softer over the years, and in its place was something louder now. Honor, maybe, or guilt. Maybe they were the same. He untied the pouch from his saddle horn. It jingled. 8 silver dollars. Everything he had. 8, he said. His voice was gravel, but it cut clean through the crowd. The trapper hesitated, spat again. "Ain't worth it." No one else spoke. The auctioneer's grin faltered. "Sold!" To the quiet gentleman with a nose for quality. Boone stepped forward, every stride heavier than the last. He didn't look at the girl, didn't look at the crowd, just dropped the coins into the man's greasy hand, then turned toward the edge of the gathering. "Come on," he said without turning his head. She stepped down from the platform without a sound. Her bare feet hit the ground like whispers. No thanks, no tears, just movement, controlled, surviving. They walked past stairs thick with judgment. A few folks looked away, a few didn't. One man muttered, "Poor bastard just bought himself a world of hurt." Boone said nothing, but the knot in his chest tightened. He'd bought a girl. No, he'd paid a debt. And debts like this never came cheap. Can you guess what's about to happen? Leave your prediction in the comments. Part 2. The trail out of Last Hope was dry, narrow, and lined with brittle brush that snapped like old bones under Dusty's hooves. The girl rode behind Boone, wrapped in a threadbare blanket he'd tossed her way without a word. She hadn't spoken either, not since stepping down from the platform. No thanks, no questions, just silence. Boone preferred it that way. They rode for miles, the town shrinking behind them until it was just another dust-covered memory he didn't plan on revisiting. The sky above stretched wide and cloudless, a pale blue ceiling that watched them both with indifference. At dusk, Boone pulled them off the trail to a shallow bend by a dry creek bed. Rocks ringed the spot like old teeth, and the wind didn't bite so hard there. He unsaddled Dusty, brushed him down, and began gathering wood, thin, wind-stripped branches that cracked easy. Eliza sat near the fire circle, arms wrapped tight around her knees, eyes following everything, but never lingering too long. Her body was still, but her gaze moved like prey. Boone noticed without letting on. He got the fire going. Low flame, no smoke. Habit. From a saddlebag, he pulled a pouch of jerky and tossed a strip toward her. She caught it without flinching. Boone sat down across from her, chewing slow. The fire popped once, then settled into a quiet flicker between them. They didn't speak. The silence wasn't awkward. It was something else, something worn and familiar, like two old hounds resting near the same fire. Not friends, not enemies, just survivors. After a while, Eliza stood, walked to the edge of the firelight, knelt. She picked through the brush, gathering something with care, roots maybe, or herbs. She moved like she knew what to look for. Boone watched, eyes narrowing. That wasn't the movement of a town girl. That was backcountry training. Apache, maybe, or something close. When she returned, she sat on a flat stone and began grinding what she'd found with another rock, rhythmically, like she'd done it 100 times before. Boone didn't ask. She didn't offer. But something shifted then, just a little. That night, Boone laid out his blanket closer to the fire than usual. Not too close, not near enough to spook her. Just closer. Eliza curled up on the opposite side, the firelight dancing across her features. In the glow, Boone could see the grime on her cheeks, the faint outline of a bruise along her jaw. But her eyes were open, scanning the stars through the spaces in the rocks above. Boone laid back, eyes on the sky too. A shooting star burned across the heavens. Eliza whispered, barely audible, "He used to say the stars were spirit fires." Boone didn't turn his head. He just muttered, "He was right." Silence returned, but it wasn't cold anymore. It held warmth, and maybe something like trust starting to sprout in the cracks between them. By the second morning, the silence between them had settled into something almost comfortable. Boone rose before the sun, like he always did, and set about making a pot of weak coffee over the dwindling embers. Eliza was still wrapped in the blanket, eyes closed, but not asleep. She never really slept deep. Not yet, not like someone who felt safe. Boone didn't wake her. He didn't say a word. He just poured a second tin cup and left it near the flat stone she'd used the night before, steam curling quietly in the dawn chill. By the time he came back from checking Dusty's hooves, the cup was empty. They rode without hurry, Boone watching the horizon, Eliza scanning the brush line. He noticed how she marked animal tracks with her eyes, how she noted the birds going quiet before a hawk passed overhead. This girl knew how to read the land. That night, they camped near an old wind-stripped tree that leaned like it was tired of standing. Boone laid out his gear, checked his rifle, set up a small cook fire again. While he was tending to Dusty, Eliza moved to the saddlebag and pulled out a frayed piece of cloth. She threaded a needle from her own small pouch, something she must have hidden in her dress. Then, without a word, she sat cross-legged and began stitching the torn leather on one of Boone's worn straps. Her hands were steady, efficient, careful. Boone watched from the edge of the firelight, said nothing. When she was done, she folded the strap back into place, adjusted the buckles the way they should sit, and pushed it toward his pack. He didn't say thank you, but later when she was turned away, he ran his thumb over the fresh stitches, slow and thoughtful. Another night, the cold crept in harder than before. Boone saw her shiver once, arms tight around herself. Without a word, he got up, fetched a second old blanket from Dusty's packs, and draped it over her shoulders. She didn't react at first, didn't flinch or speak. But a moment later, as Boone returned to his spot by the fire, he saw her pull it tighter, curl into it, and exhale something that sounded like relief. Still no words, but something was being spoken, loud and clear. Over the next few days, more of these silent exchanges passed between them. Eliza left an extra strip of rabbit meat near his gear one morning, freshly cooked before dawn. Boone, in turn, adjusted the saddle rigging on the horse she now rode, tighter, safer. One evening, she handed him a small bundle of herbs and said quietly, "Chew this if your chest starts burning at night. You cough when you sleep." Boone blinked. He hadn't noticed, but she had. He took the bundle, gave a short grunt that might have meant thanks, might have meant something more. They still didn't talk much, didn't need to. But with each small act, each careful offering and wordless return, the distance between them shrank. Not like lovers, not yet. Not like friends either. More like two broken branches leaning against each other just enough to stay upright. And maybe that was the beginning of something stronger than either of them expected. The wind shifted that night, carried a colder edge with it, sharp and dry, like it had scraped across bones before reaching them. Boone built the fire higher than usual. Not enough to draw attention, but enough to keep the chill from sinking into their joints. He noticed Eliza rubbing her wrists beneath the blanket, the skin still raw where the auction ropes had bitten. He didn't offer balm, didn't reach out. He just pulled out his old flask, empty of whiskey but full of warm river water, and set it beside her boot. When she looked up, he nodded once. Her fingers trembled as she unscrewed the cap. Later, as they settled in, Boone turned his eyes skyward, watching the stars fight through a patch of thin cloud. The silence between them had grown heavier, not hostile, just full, like the air before a storm. Then he heard it, a breath that caught in the throat, a sharp intake, and something else. Eliza was shaking, not from cold, from something deeper. He didn't speak, just turned his head slightly, watching from the corner of his eye. Her shoulders were hunched, fists clenched in the blanket. Her face was tight, her eyes wide and far off. A nightmare, but she was awake. "Bandits," she said suddenly, voice thin and flat, like a string stretched too tight. "They came just before dawn. Horses everywhere, guns, screaming." Boone said nothing. Let her speak or not. He wasn't about to rip the wound open. But she kept going, voice low, rhythm flat, like she was reading from a list in her mind. "They didn't come to trade, didn't want cattle or goods. They wanted maps. My pa knew places, old mines, water no one else could find. Jed Sloan, the one who runs them, he knew my father held something worth dying for." She stared at the fire. The flames reflected in her eyes, flickering like memories. "My sisters tried to run. Lena, she's 14, grabbed a knife. Sari hid under the floorboards. I tried to get them out. Pa told me to run. I didn't. I couldn't." Boone's hand hovered near the fire, still as stone. He didn't look at her, just listened. "They took them, left me bleeding in the dirt. I followed them for 2 days before I collapsed. Thought I'd die out there. Would have been easier." The last line hung there, heavy, too honest. Boone shifted, reached into his saddlebag, pulled out an old tin cup, filled it with water, and warmed it by the fire. He didn't speak, just placed it gently beside her again, this time with a strip of jerky. Not comfort, not pity, presence. She looked at it, then at him. Her voice cracked. "You ain't gonna tell me to let it go?" Boone shook his head, slow. "Didn't let go of mine. Just learned how to carry it." Eliza blinked. The fire flickered. Something in her shoulders dropped, a fraction of an inch, but enough. She took the cup, took the food, sat beside him. No closer than before, but no longer apart. The sky was clear that night, clearer than it had been in days. The stars spilled across the heavens like someone had torn open a bag of diamonds and let 'em fall. Boone sat on a flat rock near the edge of their camp, cleaning his rifle with slow, practiced hands. Not because he expected trouble that night, but because habits kept the mind from drifting into places it had no business going. Eliza was a few paces away, perched on a low boulder. She wasn't grinding herbs or prepping food like usual, just staring upward, arms wrapped around her knees, hair unbraided and wind-tangled. For a while they didn't speak. Then, softly, she said, "My pa used to say the sky was where the spirits kept watch. Said if you looked long enough, you'd find someone you lost, still burning." Boone didn't answer right away, just kept running the cloth along the barrel, eyes down. Then, quiet as wind and tall grass, he said, "I used to believe that too." Eliza looked over, not surprised, just waiting. He set the rifle aside, rubbed the bridge of his nose like a man trying to hold something in place that kept slipping loose. "My little girl," he said, 6 years old. Got a cough one winter that never left. Doc couldn't name it, just called it what they all call things they don't understand, a bad spell." He looked up at the sky then, eyes narrowed, not against the wind, against the memory. "She died on a Sunday, snow still falling. My wife didn't last the year after that." Eliza didn't move, didn't pity him, just listened. Boone breathed in slow. I left everything, the house, the graves. Figured if I kept riding, I might outrun the parts that still hurt. He gave a short, humorous laugh. Turns out, grief's got a long damn reach. Eliza looked back at the stars. So why'd you stop that day in Last Hope? Boone was quiet for a long beat. Then, because I saw the eagle, and I remembered what your pa did for me. He didn't ask who I was or what I'd done, just gave me water, shade, and walked away. He saved you. Yeah, but not just from death. From myself, too. They sat in silence again, but it wasn't empty. It was full, like a church that didn't need walls. Then Eliza reached into her satchel, pulled out a small worn leather pouch. Inside was a smooth river stone. Etched into it, faint but still visible, was the outline of an eagle in flight. My father carved this the day before the rattlers came, she said. Said it was meant for the next person who needed strength. She extended it. Boone didn't reach for it at first, but then, slow, he took it. Held it in his palm like it was heavier than it looked. Thank you, he said. Not just to her, to the man he owed, to the moment that reminded him some wounds don't need to heal. They just need someone to hold them with you. The days grew hotter as they moved north. The grass thinned, the ground cracked. Shadows stretched longer out here, like the land remembered violence. They camped near an old stone ridge one night, tucked low in a dry ravine. Boone had just finished securing Dusty when Eliza spoke, voice sharp, quiet. They're close. Boone straightened, eyes scanning. Who? She didn't blink. The rattlers. He froze. You sure? She nodded. I saw their tracks 2 miles back. The way they move, the boot pattern, tight formation. That's Jed Sloan's crew. Boone swore under his breath. Figured we had more time. We don't. She knelt and began drawing in the dirt with a stick, marking ridges and valleys, placing pebbles for elevation. They're headed here, she said, tapping a cluster of rocks shaped like jagged teeth. They call it the Devil's Spine. Deep canyon, natural choke point. One way in, hard to get out. Boone recognized the name, heard it whispered in saloons and cattle camps. The kind of place a smart man avoided unless he had a death wish. That's where they're holding him? He asked. Eliza nodded, jaw tight. My sisters, Lena and Sari. Last I heard, Jed kept 'em alive. He thinks they know where Pa's maps are. Boone leaned in, brows furrowed. Maps. She sat back, dusted her hands. My father traded with trappers, tribes, even surveyors. Knew the land better than any man alive. Springs hidden under rock, silver veins untouched. Jed wanted that knowledge. And your sisters? Leverage, she said flatly. He's trying to break 'em, make 'em talk. He thinks I know too. Boone cursed again, louder this time. That's why you were on that auction block. They caught me trailing them. I was weak, starving. Someone turned me in to earn a favor. Boone looked at her, really looked. She wasn't just a runaway girl with a scarred past. She was a survivor with a target on her back and a mission burning behind her eyes. I thought this was about getting you out safe, he muttered. Eliza stood, staring into the growing dark beyond the ridge. It never was. Boone rubbed a hand across his stubbled jaw. He'd faced outlaws, deserters, even the occasional corrupt lawman. But this felt different. These weren't men hungry for gold or glory. They were building something, a kingdom of blood and fear in the shadows of the frontier. They got 20 men, maybe more, he said, thinking aloud. Horses, guns. You and me, we're not a damn army. No, she said. "But we know the land better than they think, and you've fought worse, haven't you?" Boone didn't answer right away, because yes, he had, and that's what scared him. He looked up at her, the girl he'd bought for $8 silver and a slice of his soul, and saw someone who wasn't asking for rescue anymore. She was asking for a partner. The fire was down to coals when Boone made his decision. He didn't say it out loud, didn't announce anything. He just sat there, staring into the glowing embers like they held some kind of answer. The sky above was black, the stars sharp. Cold wind pushed through the canyon walls like a warning. Eliza sat across from him, cross-legged, sharpening her father's hunting knife with long, practiced strokes. Her bow rested beside her, its string freshly waxed. She looked up once, caught him watching. She didn't ask what he was thinking, because she already knew. Boone stood, walked over to his saddlebag, and pulled out a small leather pouch. From it, he laid out the contents in the firelight: a spool of tripwire, 2 iron caltrops, a striker flint, and a strip of old cavalry-issue jerky. Tools not for a cowboy, but for a soldier. Eliza's eyes flicked to the wire, then to him. She didn't speak, just nodded once. He sat back down and began loading fresh cartridges into his rifle with the same care a preacher lays out communion bread. "You ever shoot one of these?" he asked, almost casual. She shook her head. "My father taught me bow. Quiet. Doesn't need reloading." Boone gave a half-smile. "Fair enough." They fell into a quiet rhythm, cleaning weapons, testing arrowheads, tightening saddle straps, preparing not just to run or hide, but to fight. Later, as the moon rose, Eliza pulled something from her satchel, a strip of cloth. She began winding it around her wrist, covering the scarred skin where the ropes had dug in. Boone watched her fingers work. "You ready for what's waiting up there?" he asked. Eliza didn't answer right away. Then, "No, but I'm going anyway." He nodded. That was enough. He walked a few paces to the edge of camp, scanned the horizon. The Devil's Spine loomed in the distance like the mouth of hell itself, black against black. He could feel the weight of it already, what they were riding into. He turned back to her, cleared his throat. "I ain't got a plan that ends with us riding out clean," he said. "Just one that gives us a shot at reaching them girls." Eliza stood, faced him. "If I don't try," she said, "I don't deserve to live free." That hit him harder than she could know. Boone reached into his coat and pulled out his second holster, a worn Navy Colt, half rusted but clean inside. He handed it to her butt first. She looked at it, surprised. "I thought you didn't." "I didn't," he said. "Not since the war." She took the revolver, checked the chamber, snapped it closed. "Thank you." He nodded. "You point it, you pull it. No hesitation." "I won't." There were no handshakes, no speeches. Just 2 people, shoulder to shoulder, staring down a canyon full of killers. The vow had already been made, in silence. The Devil's Spine wasn't just a name. It was a place that looked like God had cracked open the earth and left it bleeding. Sheer cliffs plunged into a deep ravine carved by wind and time, jagged like broken teeth. The air smelled of dust and ash, and even the birds seemed to steer clear. Boone and Eliza crouched low behind a ledge, peering down into the canyon floor where the rattlers had made camp. Canvas tents flapped in the breeze, cook fires burned low, and at the far end, half hidden by brush and rock, stood a makeshift stock-a-day, a pen for people, not cattle. Eliza's fingers dug into the dirt as she scanned the faces behind the fence. "There," she whispered, breath catching. "Lena and Sorry." Boone followed her gaze. 2 girls, thin, dirty, but alive. Hope twisted inside her like a knife. Boone pulled out a small notebook, worn, edges curled, and began sketching quickly. Patrol routes, guard rotations, blind spots. His military mind was still sharp, even after all those years trying to forget. "We'll hit from the ridge just before dawn," he said. "You take high ground, arrows first, quiet. I'll draw their fire when I move in." Eliza nodded, jaw clenched. Then, just as she turned to leave, a rustling sound. Not from the camp, from behind. Boone's hand went to his rifle. Eliza ducked low. Silence. Then a voice, low, raspy, old. "You're not the only ones huntin' Sloan." Out from the shadows stepped a man, native, face weathered like canyon walls, eyes sharp and slow. He carried a long rifle across his back and a tomahawk at his belt. Boone stood slowly. "You followin' us?" The man shook his head. "Been following Jed Sloan for 10 winters. He killed my brother, took my land. Now he wants more." Eliza stepped forward, recognition flickering in her face. "You're Gray Rock. My father spoke of you." He nodded. "And you're the fire he said would return." Boone exchanged a glance with Eliza. This wasn't coincidence. Gray Rock knelt and pulled out a small bundle of sticks. He laid them in a pattern, 4 stones at the corners, 1 bone in the center. "This is a curse pattern," he said. "I taught your father. Now I teach you. When the fire lights this circle, the wind will turn." Boone didn't know if he believed in curses, but he believed in allies. And this one had come with blood in his eyes and a plan in his hands. As night fell, the canyon went still. Boone checked his rifle one last time. Eliza wound a leather strap tight around her wrist. Gray Rock sat silent, eyes closed, lips moving in an old language Boone didn't understand. But somehow, it made the wind change. There was no more talking, because in a few hours, everything would either break apart or fall into place. Thun 3. The canyon was still. Too still. Boone didn't trust stillness. Not in war, not in the wild. It usually meant something was waiting to happen, or something already had. He crouched near the ridge's edge, rifle across his knees, eyes locked on the Rattlers' camp far below. The tents were dim, fires reduced to red eyes in the dark. Shadows moved in the distance, sentries, lazy in the early morning lull. Behind him, Eliza crouched low, bow in hand. She hadn't spoken since they'd left the upper bluff. Her face was drawn, pale in the moonlight, but her eyes, they burned. To Boone's left, Gray Rock sat cross-legged, sprinkling powder across a circle of stones. He murmured in his native tongue, low and rhythmic, a chant that sounded older than the rocks beneath them. Boone checked his watch. Just past 4. 3 guards at the pen, he whispered. 2 with rifles, 1 pacing. Eliza gave a tight nod. Lena's always awake just before dawn. If she sees us, she'll know. Boone handed her a flare stick. "If it goes sideways, light this. Doesn't matter where I am, I'll find you." She looked at him, eyes holding for a beat too long. "And if you don't?" Boone gave a grim half-smile. "Then I ain't worth findin'." Gray Rock stood, slung his rifle across his back. "When the fire takes the circle, wind will shift. Use it. It will mask your shots." Boone didn't believe in magic, but he believed in timing. He nodded once, then took a deep breath. "Let's move." They split like smoke. Eliza climbed higher, silent as breath, finding her perch on a sandstone outcrop that overlooked the stockade. From there, she had line of sight to the cage, the sentries, and the canyon trail. Boone descended lower, crouched behind a cluster of boulders. He could smell the camp now, sweat, gun oil, grease. He waited. Time thickened. Then, a single hawk's cry echoed across the cliffs. Boone tensed. It was Eliza's signal. 2 guards near the pen had shifted positions. One moved toward the latrine. The other turned his back to light a smoke. Eliza struck. The arrow hissed through the air and found its mark. Throat, clean. The man dropped without a sound. Second arrow, fast, right through the shoulder of the smoker, dropping him hard. Boone moved, fast and quiet, covering ground like a shadow. The third guard saw him, too late. One clean punch, jaw snapped. The man went limp. Boone knelt at the cage door, picked the lock, took 3 heartbeats. Then, "Lena, sorry, move." 2 small figures blinked up at him. Fear, hope, disbelief tangled in their faces. "Boone?" one whispered. Eliza said, "She ain't wrong."
"Stay behind me." From above, a second hawk call, urgent. Boone's stomach dropped. Trouble. He turned, just in time to see a flare of orange behind the tents, a rising wall of fire. The curse circle had been lit, and now the wind howled. Smoke rolled in, thick and blinding, blowing directly into the Rattlers' camp. Shouts rose. "Who lit that? Get the girls! Get the damn gate!" Boone pushed Lena and Sari forward. "Run when I say, not before." Gunshots cracked, screams followed. From the cliffs, arrows rained down. And behind it all, Boone saw him, Jed Sloan, standing like a dark king at the heart of the chaos, eyes standing, gun drawn. Their eyes locked. Boone raised his rifle. Jed smiled and vanished into the smoke. The devil's spine erupted like a thunderclap in a bottle. Smoke churned in thick sheets across the canyon floor, turning men into shadows and sound into chaos. Gunfire cracked through the air, scattered and wild. Horses screamed. Men shouted names and curses, but the wind twisted everything, made it ghost-like. Boone didn't hesitate. "Go," he barked, pushing Lena and Sari toward the narrow trail up the cliff face. "Follow the ridge. Eliza will cover you." The girls ran, slipping once but catching each other. Boone raised his rifle, covered them, shot one man barreling from the shadows. Another came from the side. Boone spun, fired, hit center mass, dropped. A second later, Eliza's voice rang out, sharp, clear. "2 more, left flank." Boone shifted just as a figure rose from the smoke with a hatchet raised. The man never made it halfway. An arrow thudded into his chest, sending him spinning backward. Boone grunted, "Nice shot." From her perch above, Eliza didn't respond. She was already loading another arrow. Below, the Rattlers began regrouping. Jed Sloan's voice rang over the smoke. "Find the girl! She's the key! I want her alive!" Boone's jaw clenched. This wasn't just a fight anymore. It was a hunt, and Eliza was the prize. He moved fast, cutting low through the tents. Caught one man reloading, pistol down. Boone tackled him, slammed his head into a water trough, held until the body went slack. Then, a scream. From above. Eliza! Boone looked up and saw her position had been compromised. A Rattler had climbed the opposite ridge, was now behind her, charging fast with a blade drawn.
"Eliza!" Boone roared, too far to shoot. She turned just in time, dropped her bow, rolled. The blade sliced her arm, shallow but sharp. She cried out, kicked the attacker off balance. Boone raised his rifle, but the angle was tight, too risky. Eliza didn't wait. She grabbed her own knife and lunged. The man swung again, missed. Eliza drove her blade into his side, twisted hard. He fell. She staggered back, panting, blood dripping down her sleeve, but alive. Boone exhaled.
"Hell of a girl," he muttered. He turned back toward the camp and saw Jed Sloan. The outlaw stood dead center, coat open, rifle in hand, smoke curling from his cigar. "You again," Jed called, voice smooth like poison. "Always showing up where you ain't wanted." Boone stepped forward. "You've got two choices," he said. "Walk away now or leave in a pine box." Jed laughed. "Boy, this canyon already is a box." And he raised his rifle. They fired at the same time. Boone dropped low. Jed's bullet grazed his shoulder. Boone's shot clipped Jed's ribs, enough to knock him sideways, not down. The smoke thickened again. Boone blinked, coughed, reloaded. But when he looked up, Jed was gone. Again.
The battle thinned after that. The wind kept working in their favor. Gray rock appeared at the southern ridge, firing clean, controlled shots that pushed the rattlers back. Eliza limped down the cliff with Lena and Sari at her side, arm tied tight with a strip of her own shirt. They'd made it, but Boone knew better than to celebrate, because Jed Sloan wasn't dead, not yet. And the kind of men like him don't stop until they're buried deep, face down. The smoke had begun to clear. The sun was just cresting the eastern ridge, throwing pale gold light across the scorched canyon floor. Most of the rattlers had scattered, dead or fled, their camp a wreckage of broken tents and blood in the dust. But Boone wasn't looking for survivors. He was hunting one ghost, Jed Sloan. Boone tracked the blood trail through the rocks, slow and sure. The footprints staggered. Jed had been hit. Good. But he wasn't the type to bleed out politely. He'd crawl through cactus and glass if it meant getting one more shot. Boone passed the edge of a dry stream bed. Then he heard it. The click of a hammer. "Drop it." Boone stopped cold. Jed stepped out from behind a stone outcrop, rifle up, coat torn and stained. "You got me once," Jed said, voice still too damn smooth for a man with a hole in his side. "I won't let it happen again." Boone turned slow, hands away from his gun. "Ain't looking to die today, Jed." Jed sneered. "Coulda fooled me." Boone took a breath. "You're bleeding. You ain't got long. Let it end here." Jed barked a laugh. "You think this ends here? You think killing me changes anything? I built something, Crowder, something bigger than both of us." Boone's eyes narrowed. "You built a damn prison." "I built order," Jed hissed. "While you were riding around feeling sorry for yourself, I was carving out a future. You murdered families, sold girls like cattle." Jed's eyes flared. "They were weak. I did what the land demanded." Boone shook his head slowly. "No, you did what your cowardice allowed." Silence. A long, tense beat. Jed raised his rifle. "Let's finish it then." But Boone was faster. Not flash fast, not flashy, just certain. He drew, fired once, center mass. Jed staggered back, dropped his rifle, fell to his knees. Blood spread through his shirt, blooming like red fire. He gasped, looked down, then up at Boone. "This ain't over," he whispered. Boone stepped forward, looked him in the eye. "Yes, it is." Jed dropped. No last breath, no speech, just a body in the dust, like so many others who thought they were untouchable. Boone stood over him a moment, breathing hard. Then he holstered his gun. Behind him, footsteps approached. Eliza. She didn't speak, just looked down at the man who had stolen her family, scarred her body, chased her across the West. "Is he dead?" she asked. Boone nodded once. Eliza knelt, picked up a handful of dust, let it fall over Jed's body. Not a curse, not a prayer, just closure. Then she turned and walked away. Boone followed. They didn't look back. The wind changed again, cooler now, softer. The battle was over, the bodies left behind for the canyon to reclaim. Boone and Eliza moved quietly through the high country with Lena and Sari, the girls bundled in blankets, their eyes wide but finally free of terror. They made camp in a small basin surrounded by juniper and stone. No fire, just blankets and silence. Boone stood at the edge of the clearing, sharpening a blade slowly, mechanically. He wasn't looking at anything, not really. Eliza approached, arms wrapped tight, her wound freshly wrapped.
"I cleaned the cut again," she said. "Should heal fine." Boone nodded. "Good." She hesitated, then reached into her satchel, pulled out a worn piece of fabric, his old shirt, the one she'd patched weeks ago by the fire. She handed it to him, clean, folded. "I washed it," she said. "Thought you'd want it back." Boone looked at the shirt, then looked at her, and said, "You keep it." Her eyes flickered. He turned away, picked up a second tin cup from his pack, and poured water into it. Then, without looking, set it on the flat stone near where she always sat at night. A second cup. A quiet seat. A place kept. Eliza didn't smile, but she sat, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched, far enough to still choose. And in that space between them, not touching, not talking, something settled. Not romance, not yet, but the promise of staying, and maybe, someday, starting again. How are you feeling witnessing this scene? Let us know your emotions in the comments below. Fun 4. 3 days had passed since the canyon burned. The wind still carried the scent of smoke, faint and distant, like the ghost of a fire that refused to leave entirely.
Boone, Eliza, and the girls had made their way deeper into the high country, away from roads, away from men. On the morning of the 3rd day, Boone stood alone near the edge of a ridge, staring down into a valley brushed with green. A stream glittered below, winding through cottonwoods like a silver thread. In his hand he held a letter, creased, weather-worn. He'd carried it for years. It was from his wife. Unsent, unread. Words she'd written before she died. Words he'd never had the strength to face. Until now. He unfolded it slowly, read each line. At first his jaw tightened. His throat worked hard against silence. But then something shifted. She had written not of blame, but of love, of letting go, of hoping he'd find peace beyond grief. Boone folded the letter back into its envelope, walked to the fire pit, and, without ceremony, burned it. No prayer, no tears, just release. Behind him, Eliza watched from a distance. She didn't ask, didn't need to. Later that afternoon, she sat beside Lena, teaching her how to tie knots with steady fingers. Sari giggled nearby, trying to balance a flat stone on her head. Eliza smiled, but her eyes flicked to the bandage on her arm, still healing, a reminder of pain, a scar that would remain. She reached into her satchel and pulled out the eagle stone, held it a moment, then walked down to the stream, bent low, and gently placed it beneath the water. Let the current take it. Boone saw her. Didn't call out, but he tipped his hat, just slightly. They didn't need to say what had happened. They had chosen not to let it define them. And that, more than any gunfight or grave, was how the war truly ended. Weeks passed. The sun climbed higher in the sky each morning, warming the hills, coaxing green from dry earth. Boone and Eliza had found shelter in an abandoned trapper's cabin tucked between 2 pine-covered ridges. It wasn't much, 3 walls barely holding, a roof patched with canvas and hope, but it was theirs now. Boone fixed the door.
rebuilt the hearth stone by stone, mended the shutters so the cold wouldn't sneak in at night. Eliza planted herbs in an old wash basin behind the cabin, sage, wild mint, lavender. She sang while she worked, soft, half-forgotten songs from when her mother was alive.
Inside, Lena and Sari played with a straw doll Eliza had sewn, their laughter bouncing off the timber like wind chimes. Boone never said much about it, but he started leaving 2 cups of coffee on the table each morning. One was always for her. At night, after the girls were asleep, Boone would sit by the fire, working leather or cleaning his rifle. Eliza would take her place beside him, not too close, not too far, just beside. They didn't speak of love, they didn't speak of what now. But Eliza hung a second coat hook near the door. Boone built a second saddle rack outside. And one evening, without thinking, he added her name, just her initials, next to his on the inside of the cabin's beam. BC and EG, carved side by side with his old army knife. It wasn't much, but it was proof of presence. They'd stopped running, stopped surviving, started living. Spring touched the mountains like a whisper. The snow melted slow, giving way to soft moss and the first wildflowers. Small things, fragile but stubborn, blooming where even stone had once seemed eternal.
One morning, Eliza stood outside the cabin, apron dusted with flour, her hands on her hips, watching Boone dig post holes for a new corral. His shirt was half unbuttoned, sweat on his brow, hair longer than he used to wear it. He muttered to himself about mules and fence wire. She smiled. Behind her, Lena and Sari collected pebbles from the creek bed, sorting them by color. It had become a morning ritual. Sari claimed she was building a stone church for the birds. Eliza let her. That same day, Boone came in from the woods with a bundle wrapped in burlap. When Eliza opened it, she found cedar planks, sanded smooth, and a small tin box of nails. "Thought maybe," he started, clearing his throat, "if you ever wanted a crib." Eliza stared at the bundle, then looked at him. He didn't explain, didn't need to, because 2 weeks before she'd handed him a sprig of yarrow and said without ceremony, "The sickness didn't take. I reckon there's something growin'." He had nodded once, said nothing. But now, this. Not a cradle yet, just the start of one. Later that evening, Boone carved a bird into one of the planks, rough but proud, an eagle in mid-flight. Eliza didn't say a word. She just reached for his hand and held it, not as a promise, but as permission to begin again. It was near dusk when the eagle came. The sky had turned that soft kind of gold that made everything feel quieter, like the land itself was holding its breath. Boone sat on the porch, a tin cup of coffee in one hand, the old army knife in the other. He wasn't carving, just holding it. Inside the cabin, Eliza rocked slowly in a creaky old chair, her fingers gently tracing the edge of a quilt she was stitching for the baby. She hummed without knowing it, an old hymn, broken in places, but warm all the same. The girls were inside, asleep early after a day spent chasing frogs and naming clouds. And the eagle, wide-winged and effortless, glided over the treetops like a benediction. It circled once, then twice, then vanished behind the ridge. Boone watched it go. Didn't smile, didn't cry, but something inside him, something buried deep and hard, finally exhaled. He stood, stepped into the cabin, and quietly closed the door behind him. There was no need to bolt it, not tonight. The wind shifted once more, brushing through the gaps in the wood with the scent of pine and wildflowers.
Eliza looked up as he entered. She didn't speak, just reached out, one hand, palm up, waiting. Boone took it, sat beside her. No words, no need. And in that silence, full of warmth, of worn things made new, something sacred settled in. They were home. If you like this video, comment number 1. If you don't, comment number 2. Please subscribe to the channel to watch more videos and give me more motivation to collect and share other stories.